What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Cocktails in the War Room. Welcome to the War Room. I'm your host, Mistress Carrie. Is this really episode 361? Is that where we're at right now? Did I read that correctly? That's kind of insane. What's today? What's the episode today? 321. Sorry about that. It's been a long day already. So welcome to the War Room for the 321st time. And we've weathered a lot of things in the War Room over the last 5.5 years. We have dealt with a pandemic. We have dealt with personal loss and tragedy. We have celebrated amazing achievements. We have lost loved ones, family members, coworkers, and friends. And just a couple weeks ago, we were here talking about the loss of Lyndon Byers, who, of course, I worked with at WAF for more than 20 years. And last week, we didn't get together here in the War Room because I was at Shinedown tour rehearsal, getting ready for the Dance Kid Dance Tour to kick off this past weekend in Boston, which we can talk about in a bit. I've been saying for a long time on the radio, in interviews, when people would ask me questions, and obviously here in the War Room, about what's coming for music fans. And I don't think that any of us can really, truly prepare for what's coming. And what I mean by that is it's remarkable that with as many rock stars as we have lost young, members of the 27 Club, you look at guys like Randy Rhoads or Cliff Burton, who were gone way before their time. How many rock stars have lived well into old age and continued to spoil us with new music, with live performances, with interviews, with social media content? I mean, we're living in a world where we still have 2 of the 4 Beatles, even though John Lennon was taken long before his time. And so as music fans that grew up with the influence of the greatest of the greats, I'm talking the legends, I'm talking the Beatles, I'm talking everybody from the Stones and the Eagles to Led Zeppelin, losing John Bonham ahead of his time, but having the rest of Led Zeppelin working on other things, losing Freddie Mercury before it was time, but having the rest of the band there, keeping the music alive, touring, making appearances, influencing other artists. We have been lulled into this sense that our heroes are immortal, especially with the life choices that artists have famously made, like Ozzy, like Keith Richards. The stories that we've heard from, say, the guys from Motley Crue about how insane the 80s were, that we've heard all these stories and we somehow believe that they are immortal, that they are bulletproof, that they are there forever. And while their music and their influence is there forever, as we learned today, that these rock legends, these heroes, these pioneers and pillars that we have all worshiped at the altar of for our entire lives are in fact mortal. And what we saw on July 5th was a celebration of the life and influence of Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne. And we saw Ozzy at 76 years old on a throne because of Parkinson's, making it hard for him to get around. But we saw the original lineup of Black Sabbath get together to celebrate their music and their songwriting and their legacy. And unlike a lot of other artists that didn't get, hello Wednesday, that didn't get to celebrate their music in their lifetime, right? Like the famous Freddie Mercury tribute concert that so many artists took part in. Freddie Mercury obviously wasn't there for that. Hold on. Wednesday, would you like to say hi to everyone? Go ahead, say hi to everyone. Did you come in to say hi to everyone because you know everyone is sad? Yeah, I know, love bug. Mommy's been sad all day. Come on, Friday. Come say hi to everyone. Sit down and say hi to everyone. Sit. Here. Good girls. Good girls. Everybody could use a little smile right now. Everybody's very sad. Yes, good girl, Wednesday. You're the intuitive one that knows when Mommy doesn't feel good and when Mommy is sad, aren't you? Yeah, you are. You know. You know. You're a good girl. Can I have your paw? Thank you. Can I have the other paw? Down. Good girl. So what we saw at Villa Park was Ozzy being able to actually be celebrated while he was still alive, right? It's like attending your own funeral in a way. It's like getting one of those Lifetime Achievement Awards at the Academy Awards when everybody celebrates your career while you're sitting right there. Kind of like a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, which Ozzy just had as a solo artist. And a couple of years ago, Sharon had said in an interview that it was Ozzy's dream to have 2 farewell shows, one as a solo artist and one reuniting the members of Black Sabbath. She talked about it for a while, then got really quiet about it. And then we found out about the Back to the Beginning show because I think a couple years ago, Ozzy had still thought that he would recover more than he had from the fall and the back and the neck injury. And obviously getting the Parkinson's diagnosis just a few years ago confirmed that is something that determines your life. You don't get to determine Parkinson's. Parkinson's kind of puts you on its own timeline. So when we found out about the Back to the Beginning concert and we found out that Ozzy was going to make one more performance with the original lineup of Black Sabbath and that he wanted to bring all of his friends, right? And all of the bands that were influenced by Ozzy and the artists that looked up to Ozzy as a mentor, as a friend. When we finally found out about the Back to the Beginning concert, we knew that Ozzy was not going to perform anymore. But the way that they had made it sound is that they were retrofitting his home in Birmingham. They were redoing his studio with rails so that he could continue to work on new music and continue to be a recording artist, even though he knew he was not going to be able to perform live anymore. And so I think everyone is so shocked today getting the news that 76-year-old Ozzy Osbourne passed away is because we knew he wasn't going to be able to tour anymore. And we saw him on that stage still loving being in front of a crowd and loving performing his music. But I think we all kind of thought, like, he'll still make music. He just did those collaborations, Crack Cocaine and God of Rock and Roll with Billy Morrison. Zakk Wylde had been talking about how they could just put Ozzy's throne on a crane with a water cannon and he could still perform live. And so even though planning for Back to the Beginning, according to Tom Morello in a recent interview, started over a year ago, I don't think anyone could have imagined that we were going to be here today, mourning the loss of a legend, an icon. I don't really know what words to describe him as, because in the world of hard rock and heavy metal, the world we live in would not look the way that it looks today if it were not for Ozzy. That's just a fact that the first Black Sabbath album 55 years ago changed everything. And that Ozzy leaving Black Sabbath or getting kicked out of Black Sabbath and charting his own path as a solo artist with the musicians that he worked with the iconic songs that he wrote and performed, with Ozfest, with the Osbournes show. He blazed so many trails that it's kind of hard to imagine a world if he had never been in it. And had we lost Ozzy young, we wouldn't be living in the same world that we're living in now. And so here we are today, that we find out that just a few weeks after we saw him perform for the last time on stage, while raising almost $200 million for charity and counting, We just got word yesterday that the live concert is being edited down into a feature film that's going to be in theaters around the world in 2026. That we are going to wake up tomorrow morning for the first time in most of our lives, I'm assuming, unless someone's over 76 years old in the war room, for the first time in our lives tomorrow morning, we're going to wake up in a world that Ozzy isn't in. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm having a really hard time wrapping my brain around that idea. And I've been talking about it because this is a feeling that we are going to have to get used to, because it's going to happen again. These amazing artists that have given us the soundtrack to our lives and inspired and influenced all of our favorite bands. 2 of the 4 Beatles are in their 80s and still alive. Robert Plant and Jimmy Page are still here. You know, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards are still here. You know, we just lost Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys, and the shockwaves of that loss reverberated all the way through the newest artists, including Chris Cornell's daughter, who just released a Beach Boys cover saying, "Thank you for writing one of the most beautiful songs that's ever been written." And I'm just not ready to lose these artists. I definitely wasn't ready to lose Ozzy today. And today I had walked away from my computer, and even though I'm in MCHQ and kind of in and out of the studio, I always have pants or shorts with pockets so that I have my phone with me always, because I don't want to be away from my phone in the middle of the workday. And all of a sudden my phone just started going crazy with text messages. And that's never a good sign. We've weathered tragedy and trauma before, and it's always the same, that my phone just goes crazy. And so I looked online and saw the headline, and we've all seen the internet hoaxes, right? When I posted that we had lost Lyndon Byers a couple weeks ago, there were people commenting going, where is this confirmed? You know, I haven't seen this. Where is this confirmed? Like I would post that my friend had passed away without confirming it and verifying it. And so I did my due diligence, and I went and made sure that this wasn't an internet hoax. You know, we all live in this world where it's really hard to tell what's real and what's fake. And so I always check the URLs of the websites that are posting these things, because a lot of people don't realize that the big media companies live in a world where if they misprint or misreport or purposefully lie, that they can be sued for libel and slander. Whereas we're living in a world where the law in a lot of ways has not caught up with the new technology, where it's a lot harder to sue for slander and libel and misinformation when it comes to, you know, streamers and vloggers and podcast hosts. But it doesn't make the lying of it any better. So I did my due diligence, and I looked at a bunch of different reputable sources, and then I looked on Ozzy and the Osbournes pages, and I saw the statement from the family. And sometimes they could be hacked, right? So it's like in that moment, you're like, is this real? And you go through that immediate stage of denial when it comes to dealing with grief. And you're like, nah, that can't be true. We've all had so many hoaxes before, you know. And then when you see that it's true, that wave of, oh my God, washes over you. And it was very reminiscent for me of when we lost Neil Peart, which is like the last loss that we suffered before AAF went off the air, because it happened just weeks before the station was sold. And, you know, Mike Shue and I and our boss, our program director, Joe Calgaro, were in the studio, and all of a sudden the news hit, and we just started sprinting. We were digging things out of the archive for music. We were going through interview audio, and, you know, we we know how to do this. But living in this new world where I wasn't in the building and I wasn't just at one station, I'm now navigating multiple radio stations and multiple bosses and trying to make sure that I'm doing the right thing and trying to get the information right. Because when AF went off the air, so many people reached out about the things that they had experienced with us, right? A lot of them bad, the marathon bombing, 9/11, that it was us that they were with. When we lost artists like Chester Bennington 8 years ago this past weekend on Chris Cornell's birthday, when we lost Lane Staley, when we lost Kurt Cobain, when we lost Scott Weiland, when we lost Dimebag Darrell, which was a really hard day for me. That was a day I almost got fired for threatening to kill a coworker, but we'll talk about that later. And so many people reacted saying, you know, I was there with you. I was mourning with you. We went through that together. I put the radio on immediately because I knew that you would be talking about it. And so there's that weight of responsibility to make sure you don't do a shit job when you're breaking news like that. That you want to make sure that you get the facts right. That you want to make sure that you're accurate. You want to make sure that you're not being robotic and that you're allowing yourself with everyone else to experience the grief and the sadness of it. Hey, but at the same time, not letting your emotions get in the way because you have a job to do. You guys see what's going on here? Guys, we're trying to talk about Ozzy. What are you doing? Yeah, this is what we're doing, I guess. Hey, stop it, you two. So the reason why I'm saying that is I started getting messages from people, from you guys today, saying, I really need the war room tonight. We need to get in the war room and talk about this. And so this wave of like comfort came over me knowing that we were all going to get together tonight to talk about this because this is not going to be the last time that we are going to mourn the loss of a hero. And it hurts and it sucks. And we just spent all of this time 3 weeks ago happily talking to the artists we love about their favorite Ozzy stories and about Ozzy's influence and about all of the things that Ozzy and Sabbath meant to these artists that we go to the shows to see and buy their shirts and stream their albums. The soundtrack to all of our happiest moments and our saddest moments was all influenced by Ozzy. And Tony Iommi has had his health scares. Bill Ward has had his health problems. And yet Ozzy, the guy that lived through addiction, lived through serious loss, lived through the ATV accident and then the fall at home and a Parkinson's diagnosis. And just a few weeks after we saw a vibrant and happy Ozzy on stage at the end of the Back to the Beginning concert saying, thank you all, you have no idea what this means to me. And now we're in a world with no Ozzy. And it's like, I go back and think about, I went and dug out my Ozzy shirt from the No More Tears tour. This was at the Orpheum. And I remember going to that show going, I can't believe I'm going to see Ozzy at the Orpheum. Hanging out with him backstage at the DCU Center when he played a show for us. I found the audio today and I played it on some of the stations today. I'll play it on some of them tomorrow. The interview that I did with Ozzy when Black Sabbath released their last album together, the original, the original band. And thinking about all of those crazy Ozfests, right? With all of these bands that were the new second stage bands that got on the Ozfest because Jack or Kelly told their mom and dad, no, I really love this band. in all of those memories. Like, I didn't grow up listening to Black Sabbath with my parents. I discovered Black Sabbath on my own through Ozzy and through the 80s, and going back and finding Black Sabbath and realizing that that was the root of it all, the music that I love, that's where it all came from. Growing up loving the Beatles with my mom, the way that Ozzy grew up loving the Beatles, and realizing that even Ozzy loved the Beatles, that it didn't make me, Chris Jericho from Fozzy talked about that he was the nerdy Beatles guy, and that he went to school and saw the hot girls in school wearing t-shirts for artists like Ozzy. And so he wanted to have something to talk to them about. So he went to the store and started buying those albums and realized that Ozzy was a Beatles fan too. And Ozzy even said before the Back to the Beginning concert that if I die on stage at the end of the show, then I'll die a happy man. And so it makes me wonder, did Ozzy will himself to stay alive to be at that show? Or did Ozzy meet that goal of performing at that show and saying, I'm okay to go now? It just really hurts. It just sucks. The family releasing a statement that included the Osbournes' daughter, Amy, who was never part of the television show and was never kind of a public member of the Osbournes as an entity. And also Lewis, that said in part, it is with more sadness than mere words can convey that we have to report that our beloved Ozzy Osbourne has passed away this morning. He was with his family and surrounded by love. We ask for everyone to respect our family privacy at this time. And so then there is the question of, is there going to be a public memorial like they had for Dimebag Darrell, where artists go up and pay tribute? Or is it going to be a private family matter? Will Ozzy be interred somewhere where the public can visit? Or will he be on family property somewhere so that it doesn't become a crazy circus like, say, it did for Jim Morrison? I've gone to, I've talked about it before. It's something that I do when I go to Los Angeles. And when I travel, is that I try to go and visit the final resting places of the musicians that I love. So when I went to Texas, I went and saw the Abbott Brothers. I went and saw Dave Williams from Drowning Pool. When I go to Los Angeles and go to Hollywood, I go to Hollywood Forever and Forest Lawn. And I went and saw Chris Cornell after he passed away. I saw Ronnie James Dio. I saw Lemmy. Because I just feel the need to do that. And so I'm curious, Ozzy and Sharon had joked that they had had long conversations about what their wishes were. They had talked about that if either one of them got Alzheimer's, that they had already made plans to go to, I think it was Sweden, or one of those clinics that allows you to end your life peacefully. And that was something that they had already planned to do. And so they had those conversations. We know, because the Osbournes were very frank about everything, that they've had all of these conversations. And I can only hope that Jack and Kelly and Amy and Lewis, that they all had the opportunity to say everything they wanted to say. And it's just, for me, it's still so raw losing my mom and going and visiting her often. And if you go back and listen to the interview that I did with Wolfgang Van Halen a few weeks ago, talking about processing a parent loss, which is something we're all going to have to experience. None of us are getting out of this without losing our parents, unless you go before your time and then your parents have to experience your loss, which is not the way it's supposed to go. But I spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks thinking about LB's kids and hoping that they were able to say all the things. And so this is just, look, I didn't know him. I met him. I interviewed him several times. I've got pictures with him. That's actually a Polaroid, which just shows you like the era of time. Ozzy had this photo station set up where you got a Polaroid and then they gave it to you like in this little cardboard frame thing that had his logo on it and stuff. So I had to scan my Polaroid with Ozzy so that I could put it up on Instagram and stuff. But it's just really hard. And watching so many of my friends that grew up inspired and influenced by Ozzy processing the loss and the pain of this has also kind of got me too. The Shinedown show over the weekend, that song 365, which we all heard, it's going to be on the new record, but they've already released it. That was one of the most emotional parts of the show. And that song comes out of serious loss from last year, which is something that Brent and I talk about on this week's podcast episode, that Eric Bass lost his dad suddenly and his sister, and Brent lost his gran, who he was really close with. And so that part of the show where they were showing family photos and acknowledging the loss of loved ones of everyone at the TD Garden was a really powerful thing. And then I go back and think about the Back to the Beginning concert and how that was such a celebration of life because Ozzy was there. And so now there's no need to have a big memoriam concert for Ozzy, because one of the things that makes me smile is that he got to be there for it, that he got to experience the love from all of the artists that came after him. He got to experience his band back together one last time. They brought him out a cake and they, made fun of Bill Ward for playing shirtless. Tony Iommi called him Gollum while they were eating dinner before the show. He got to experience all of that. And so, while it's completely devastating and sad, how lucky is he that he got to kind of experience all of the love? There's so many pictures of Sharon on the side of the stage watching in the wings as she has for decades. And, Kelly and Jack putting pictures of their kids in the crowd with their big ear protection on, watching Grandpa on stage with his band. Debbie says he did his own memoriam. He knew, even though they started planning that show more than a year ago. Tom Morello put up a really beautiful tribute. Jason Momoa, who hosted the event, Jonathan Davis, David Draymond, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler. I mean, it's impossible. Even the New England Patriots put up a tribute to Ozzy because he and Zach went and played on the helmet after the Patriots won the Super Bowl. Even Donny Osmond today put up a tribute to Ozzy because they did that Pepsi commercial together when Jack and Kelly were teenagers. And Ozzy woke up in bed with Florence Henderson. You guys remember that commercial? And he yells, "Sharon!" The stories are just so numerous that it's kind of impossible to eulogize a guy like that. How do you sum up his influence? You can't. How do you list his accomplishments? How do you even try to figure out what the world would be like without him. And if you had told Ozzy all of that 55 years ago when Sabbath started, that he would have had that kind of impact, he wouldn't have believed it. If you had told him after he left Black Sabbath, while he was trying to put his solo career together, he wouldn't have believed it. There were times when Ozzy was not, like in the mid-90s before the Ozfest, there were people looking at Ozzy like he was going to be one of those washed up old, like 80s musicians when grunge and the 90s kind of took over. And yet Ozzy found a way to reinvent himself and to stay current and relevant in a way that not just for him, but to continue to inspire and influence future generations. And it really is a spectacular thing. He led a remarkable life, and it wasn't perfect. There's his second memoir that they just announced is coming out in October that is going to, it's called Last Rites, that is going to go into his Parkinson's diagnosis and the recovery from his injuries and his tumultuous marriage to Sharon and the planning of the Back to the Beginning concert. There is the documentary that Billy Morrison talked about in the Mistress Carrie podcast about how they interviewed everybody about this life that Ozzy has led and that they were going to continue to film the documentary all the way through the Back to the Beginning concert. So this is just the beginning of all of the things we're going to get from Ozzy posthumously. A memoir, a documentary, a feature concert film. He put all of those things in motion already. Diva wants to know, did he pass at his home in England? I have not seen. He was at Comic-Con last weekend with the family, the weekend after the Back to the Beginning concert. And that Comic-Con was Birmingham's Comic-Con. I can only imagine that he was home with his family in England, because if he was not doing well, they wouldn't have traveled back to the United States. Sharon has wanted to move back to the England for a while now, but Ozzy considered himself American in a lot of ways and didn't really want to move back. They were going to film a reality show called Home to Roost. We talked about it last year, where they were documenting the reconstruction of their Birmingham home and retrofitting his studio because they were getting ready to move back to England. And then that project never came to fruition, and probably because they kind of realized that Ozzy was struggling health-wise and kind of probably rolled all of that footage into what is going to be this documentary. So, Bish says, I worked security on the field in 2005 when Ozzy played for the Pats opener. Yeah, it just, I mean, you see that picture of him, with the Pats jersey on the helmet, and it's like, Ozzy doesn't care about American football, but he was there because he knows that the Patriots loved Crazy Train and use that song at every game. And I hope they continue to still do that. There's the video. Jeff says there's the video of him when Kelly got engaged backstage after the Back to the Beginning concert. And he yelled at Sid Wilson and says, fuck you, you're not marrying my daughter. And everybody laughed. Like, he was there. He was all there. That Ozzy with that smile. Sharon Osbourne was recently the guest on Billy Corgan's The Magnificent Others podcast. And she talked about why everybody loved Ozzy so much. Why it was so hard to hate him. And Sharon, of anybody, had every right to hate him. I think his first wife had every right, because he didn't make it easy to be his wife or his kids in a lot of ways. And yet everybody found it impossible to hate him because he exuded, for a guy that was considered, Satan's spawn himself, the Prince of Darkness, he just exuded love and happiness everywhere he went, and literally did what he was born to do up until the very end, which is kind of amazing. So, yeah, there's confirmation on Instagram that, yes, he passed in Birmingham at his home in England, which doesn't surprise me at all. The fact that he didn't want to make that long flight back to Los Angeles after the Back to the Beginning concert and then the Birmingham Comic-Con. New Centurion on Instagram said, I'm 53, grew up a fan when it wasn't widely accepted to be a metal fan, got called a Satanist, etc. Being a fan around other fans was like a legion, getting me through some tough times growing up. That's what made Ozfest so special. And it allowed Ozzy to shine his light on the next generation. Who would have known in 1999 when Jack Osbourne as a teenager was like, I love this band Slipknot, can you put them on the Ozfest? That eventually Kelly Osbourne would grow up to marry the DJ. I mean, and you just look at all of the bands that came out of the Ozfest. You look at bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit and Snot and Disturbed and Seven Dust and Cold Chamber and Life of Agony, and it's like impossible to even list them all because they're a Tool, and there's just so many bands that got on that Ozfest. Godsmack, Sully Erna posting about that a couple weeks ago on Instagram. I mean, the guy even peed on the Alamo and bit the head off a bat and snorted ants, and somehow everyone still loved him. Like, Josh on Instagram says Ozzy's voice was 1 in a million. That's something that Sam Carter from Architects said when I interviewed him before the Back to the Beginning concert, that everybody always talks about Ozzy's antics and the craziness, but that nobody gives him as much credit as he deserves for the technicality of his art, for the singer that he was, for the songwriter that he was. So yeah, you know, here we are once again, here in my war room, processing an unbelievable set of circumstances and a loss that none of us imagined that we would be processing. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else right now, guys, because we're all feeling the same thing. And I hate this feeling, and it's not going to be the last time we feel it with our legends, with the bands and the artists that we love, that we are getting to the point where being as spoiled as we have been is going to end, and we are going to lose our heroes in our lifetime, and it is going to suck. And this is where we're at right now. And I'm glad I'm not alone with all of this right now, because I think I can speak for all of you guys when I say that, you know, it feels like a little bit of our youth has passed away. It feels like a little bit of our soul has passed away. We all here are so different, yet we all have been brought together by our love of music, and we all turn to that music in our best and worst times, when we are sad, when we're happy, when we need to celebrate, when we need to mourn. And so losing one of the people that makes the music that we process things through is incredibly brutal. As Friday runs in here eating a vampire bat toy, right? Yeah, you're doing your little impression of Ozzy and biting the head off a little vampire bat, right? Is that what you're doing? Did you find the squeaker? Yep. They know. The pugs always know. Ramon Jr. says, I met Ozzy in Las Vegas about 2010. He says on YouTube. Sean says he never lost his voice, celebrating his greatness. Marcy says we're here together. John says there's no good radio station since WAF went off the air. John, that's not necessarily true. There are a lot of great radio stations like 98 Rock in Charleston, where you can hear me every weekday from 10 to 3. Like 100 FM The Pike, where you can hear me every weekday afternoon. Like 106.3 The Bone in Portland, where you can hear me every weekday afternoon. Like Laser in Springfield, where you can hear me every weekday morning from 6 to 10. There are places that you can hear me. I wanted to share some of these pictures with you on a lighter note because we didn't get together last week. And I apologize for the last minute cancellation of the War Room, but I did not expect to spend as much time as I did at Shinedown tour rehearsals last week. I entered the Shinedown Bat Cave for tour rehearsals before the first Planet Zero or Dance Kid Dance, not Planet Zero, Dance Kid Dance tour dates, and got a chance to get shown around the production. So all of these pictures here are all the dressing rooms and kind of backstage. These are the wardrobe cases in the band's dressing room, which is where like all of their clothes and stuff are stored and put into their dressing rooms at the venues. This over here, this picture right here was actually taken by Brent Smith from Shinedown, who brought me up on the stage while they were doing dress rehearsals with the lasers and the lights and the pyro. That's the catering that they had down here in the bottom in the room where I did my interview with Brent. They had like this whole like buffet of junk food in there waiting for me when I got there. Spent some time talking hot sauce with Barry. Zach Myers gave me a pair of Jordans because he heard Eric Bass and I talking on the podcast about how he never shares his sneakers. So if you went and saw the Shinedown show, you saw like the white and black Jordans that Brent Smith was wearing. They gave me a pair of that model of Jordans that Brent wears every night. Got to check out Zach's Guitar World with the Michael Myers heads all over it that you can see in that picture. Sat behind Barry Kirch's drum set that was out in the middle of the crowd. So this is why I was not in the War Room last week. But I'm really glad that we're here today. I'm also really glad that I'm not traveling like I'm going to be over the next couple of weeks because it would have really sucked if this happened and I couldn't be in the War Room with you guys. So this is why I wasn't here last week. And so this all leads up to this week's podcast episode. So let's talk about the podcast a little bit. So the last couple of weeks, we didn't get to recap the podcast last week because I wasn't here. But the last two episodes, Christina and Andrea from Lacuna Coil, episode 266 of the podcast, that was 2 weeks ago. They gave me some tips. Andrea sent me a list of restaurants he says I should eat at in Rome, which is where I'm going to be traveling to over the next couple of weeks. So I am going to go to some of those restaurants and let you guys know what's going on with that. Last week, Eddie Trunk was on talking about the last Black Sabbath and Ozzy show, talking about Steven Tyler's performance and Joe Perry and the possibility of a final Aerosmith performance, which is another band we have been lulled into a false sense of security that they are always going to be there. Joe Perry even saying all the original members are alive and well, and we should probably do one last show together. We also talked about the Scorpions movie that Eddie Trunk is going to make an appearance in. Again, a band celebrating their 60th anniversary, which is just crazy. So these are the last 2 weeks of podcast episodes. Coming out at midnight tonight is the interview that I did last week, which is why we weren't in the War Room. So this is the setup that you will hear Brent Smith talk about in this week's episode, that they put me up in the dressing room. I wanted it to look professional. I wanted it to look comfortable. And so Brent went and did a bunch of radio interviews at different radio stations around New England that morning, and then came into the dressing room and was like, "Look at you, fancy pants." And it was all set up and ready for him. And he was like, wow, you really did good. Like, this part was not recorded, but we were kind of hanging out talking. And he was like, I'm so proud of you, because there are a lot of radio people that we knew along the way that there were either stations went off the air or the stations downsized and they got laid off. He's like, and all of those people, or a lot of those people, didn't end up doing what you're doing, that you went over this speed bump and continued to move forward. And so when he walked in and saw, the setup, he was like, I wouldn't expect anything other than that's what you do, Carrie. And he was just really, really cool about it. So, this episode of the podcast is really good. We talk about some really serious things. I got some more info on the upcoming Shinedown album. He breaks down the meaning behind the new song, Killing Fields, and really kind of get into the weeds about the songwriting process. We talked about loss and processing loss. And we talked about family. We talked about my family. We talked about his family, that his son is out on the road with him for the first time ever. He's a teenager now and finally getting to experience going out on the road with his dad. It really was a family affair. Zach Meyer's son was with him. Eric Bass's wife was out on the road with him. So there's a lot of that personal stuff that you would expect. So that goes live at midnight tonight. So Christopher says, hey, MC, sad day in the music world, a day we hoped would never come. Saw Ozzy many times over the years. Remember being at Live Aid. That was the best. R.I.P. Ozzy. Brett says someone wore one at Hairfest. Lou says we're proud of you too. Betty says caught some of your clips in the AM with Brent. Yeah, I wanted to get some clips out there because obviously it was leading up to the show over the weekend, but there's a lot of really great stuff in this episode. If you're a Shinedown fan, you're going to really, really like this episode. Debbie says, are you doing an Ozzy show tomorrow? So this afternoon, because the news broke, I did Ozzy shows on the Pike and the Bone. Tomorrow, all morning on Laser, we'll be talking about Ozzy, playing clips, memories, all of that as a tribute to Ozzy tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow on 98 Rock in Charleston, the 98 Rock Lunchbox is going to be all Ozzy and a tribute to Ozzy as well. So yes, like the shows that I was on this afternoon when the news broke, that was all Ozzy. Tomorrow, the shows that were over when the news broke, that's going to be Ozzy as well. Keith says, hey, Carrie, can you wish Evan a happy 18th birthday? Yes, I can. We're not at the birthdays yet, but an 18th birthday, absolutely. Happy birthday, Evan. Cheers to you. Shinedown Devil on Instagram says, Saturday was amazing. I love Shinedown. They saved my life. That's one of the things that we talk about in this episode. I asked Brent Smith outright about the emotional connection that the band seems to have with their fans, more so than maybe some other bands. And I asked Brent, can you feel that? Can you feel that on stage? Can you feel that from the Shinedown fans? His answer is in this week's episode. Let's see. Patrick says, hey, Mistress Carrie, how do you think Audrey's wife feels? And Sharon, what do you think she's going to do now? Sharon already came out and said that they were retiring from the music business. She said that last week after the Back to the Beginning concert. So I see Sharon retiring. She managed Ozzy's career for decades upon decades. She just lost the love of her life. She lost the only man she ever loved. She met Ozzy working for her dad. So I don't see Sharon continuing to be a media figure. I don't see her on TV. I see her pouring herself into being the grandparent that the kids are going to want and wanting to make up for the fact that their grandfather is gone. That's what I see happening. She has been very famous about wanting to move out of Los Angeles. So I can imagine Ozzy's house in Los Angeles being sold. I would assume that Jack and Kelly maintain residences in the United States because I believe they're both married to Americans. I believe Amy lives in the United States because she has a music career. But I can see Sharon permanently staying in their historic home in Birmingham and being the grandma that, you know, she is excited to be. Are you bringing me toys Friday? Do you guys see this? If Friday keeps, I didn't bring dog toys in here tonight, and she's bringing them to me. Are you bringing me toys? Thank you, love bug. Thank you. Are you trying to cheer me up because you know I'm sad? You and your sister are both very good at that. Wednesday's over here. Not on the camera. Thank you. You're making everybody smile that's sad right now, you know, because you're so adorable and cute and snuggly. You're being a very good girl. You are. You're being so good. You brought me toys. Do you want your toy back? Do you want this one? Do you think it's a coincidence that this is the second vampire bat toy that she has brought in here tonight? I don't think so. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. You guys have seen the baskets of toys. She's got hundreds of them to choose from. Yeah, I know. This is the second vampire bat you've brought in here, isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah, I know. I know. So this week's podcast episode is a really, really good one. It goes live at midnight tonight, episode 268. Lou says maybe she'll help that kid Youngblood. Well, here's the thing, guys. And Eddie Trunk made me laugh when he said this on last week's podcast episode. Eddie Trunk was like, I had never even heard of Youngblood before. Youngblood's not a kid. Youngblood's not a new artist. It's just that Americans don't know who he is, but he's huge in England. He's huge in Europe and has been around for years and years and years and has collaborated with a lot of rock artists. So I've been talking about him in the sit rep, talking about him on the air for years. I was actually surprised that Eddie Trunk said he had never heard of him before because he's a huge artist. And, you know, Eddie was talking about how the Scorpions were huge in Europe for 15 years before they became huge in the 80s in the United States. And Youngblood's the same way. Youngblood's not a kid. He's already on his way to massive stardom and success, which is how he was asked to be part of the Black Sabbath show in the first place, because there's already a relationship with Youngblood and Ozzy that has gone back years. So she might help Youngblood, but I don't know if Youngblood needs the help at this point. He also has a featured documentary coming out because he's got a new album on the way that he recorded in Germany, which is where David Bowie recorded Heroes and where U2 recorded Achtung Baby at that famous studio. He just recorded his new album there and filmed the whole thing for a documentary that is going to come out, I believe, next month. So Youngblood's on his way already, with or without Sharon Osbourne. I don't know if Sharon is going to want to navigate the music business without Ozzy. For some reason, I just don't see it happening. Donna says she thinks a couple of squeaks is going to make you feel better. Exactly. John says it is not a coincidence that Friday is bringing all of the bats into the war room tonight. I don't think it's a coincidence either. So this episode goes live at midnight tonight. Just want to run through some of the things because it's already late, just because I knew we were going to be talking about Ozzy a lot. If you subscribe to the podcast, you get the sit rep, which is all your rock news, music headlines. That is like 5, 6, 7 minutes long, and you get that 5 days a week. You also get 1-minute versions of the sit rep on Laser all day and on The Bone all day in Portland as well. If you're wondering where you can listen to this week's podcast episode or any of my podcast episodes, you can listen to all the episodes right at mistresscarrie.com. Made it that easy. All the audio is up on YouTube as well. It's part of the Pantheon Podcast Network and all of the big podcast apps. You can hear it on the radio station apps that I'm on, like the Laser app. If you download it, my podcast is right there. So the podcast is literally everywhere. Just pick your favorite podcast app, search Mistress Carrie. You're going to find this artwork right here, and that's how you know that you found the right one. Locations, we're still holding strong at 149 countries, and the list of the biggest listening countries for this week is right here. So still killing it. Happy birthday, not only to Evan, who's 18 today, but also to Pat Badger from Extreme, producer and musician Steve Albini, who passed away last year at the age of 61, Don Henley, Rick Davies from Supertramp, and Mr. Funk himself, George Clinton, all born on this day, all born on Evan's 18th birthday, and happy unbirthday, Keith. So cheers to you guys. Josh on Instagram, I agree. Youngblood killed Changes from Black Sabbath. He was fantastic. And he even said that Tom Morello was a little bit nervous giving him that song. And Youngblood said, give me the ballad and I forget exactly what he said. Like, I'll tear the roof off the place, I think is what he said. And he was right. He did. Just some other big headlines. Obviously, Eddie Trunk talking about the Scorpions movie, the Ozzy movie that we were just talking about. Metallica's All Within My Hands Foundation just donated massive grants to flood relief in Texas, and also just expanded for the 7th year the Metallica Scholars Initiative, donating over $3 million. They are now in all 50 states, and they are in over 75 different colleges and universities around the country and in Guam, helping with the skills gap and trying to get Metallica fans and students access to training that they want for everything from the trades, carpentry skills, all of that kind of stuff, to AI and programming. There she comes with another toy. This time it's a little chickadee. So this is 3 that she's brought in so far. What a good girl. Well, actually 4. The other vampire bat she took back away. But these 3 she's left here. Good girl, Friday. You're being so good. So the Metallica Scholars Initiative, sorry about that. They just donated and committed to $3 million worth of school programs, which brings them up over $13.5 million that they've donated in the last 7 years, which is amazing. Matt Cameron says that he is still a working musician. He's just retired from Pearl Jam. And then we already talked about Joe Perry and his thoughts on a final Aerosmith show. So there you go. TD Garden, Lincoln Park is going to be there at the end of the month for 2 shows. Buckingham Nicks has been hinting that they may be re-releasing their 1973 album. So there's a lot going on with Stevie Nicks right now. She's going to be at the Garden in August. 9 Inch Nails will be there at the end of August. Eric Clapton will be there in September, and Bryan Adams will be there in October. The DCU Center has got Silver Scream Con and Sleep Token, and also the arena has got Ice Nine Kills with Dayseeker and the Funeral Portrait. All of these shows are at the ever-growing concert calendar at mistresscarrie.com. Big Night Live has got Everclear, Local H, and Sponge coming up in October. From Ashes to New is going to be there as well. We have got the Xfinity Center still packed with shows, including Rod Stewart and Cheap Trick at the end of the month. The Offspring, which I'm giving tickets away for this one on the Pike all this week with Jimmy Eat World and Newfound Glory. Volbeat and Hailstorm with the Ghost Inside coming up in August. Also the Doobie Brothers, Billy Idol and Joan Jett, Breaking Benjamin and 3 Days Grace, Falling in Reverse, and Papa Roach and Rise Against before the end of the outdoor concert season here in New England. And also everybody from David Lee Roth at the Hampton Beach Casino to Sully Erna at Mohegan, George Thorogood at the Lynn Auditorium, Brian Adams at Mohegan, the Lemonheads who are back together at the Wilbur, Hart at the Toyota Oakdale Theater, Robert Plant at the Schubert. Those tickets went on sale this past Friday. So there's a lot of huge shows. Christopher Cross with Toto and Men at Work at the end of the month at the Leader Bank Pavilion. The Goo Goo Dolls at the end of the month there as well. Chicago at the Pavilion next month. The Fenway Concert Series has got My Chemical Romance and the Lumineers and The Who with the Joe Perry Project, which I talked a lot of the Joe Perry Project with Eddie Trunk on last week's podcast episode. The Palladium has got In This Moment, Mushroom Head, Guar, Atreyu. The Metal and Hardcore Festival is going to be an all-day outdoor festival. That's happening just one day at the Palladium instead of a full weekend. So that is coming up as well. You could check out the concert page for that. Garbage is going to be at Roadrunner coming up in September. Also, come on. The gerbil in the computer is tired. There we go. The MGM Music Hall at Fenway, the Black Keys next month, Chevelle next month, Alabama Shakes in September, Seether and Daughtry with POD in October, Mudvayne and Static X in October, and Cage the Elephant right before Halloween. The House of Blues has got Architects next month. Bruce Dickinson, who on Friday is re-releasing Balls to Picasso. His solo album is going to be there in September. Avatar in November. Nothing More next February. Let's see. The Paradise has got Anne Berlin. Also, City Winery has got this new Unplugged Cold tour coming into City Winery Boston. They're doing only city wineries on this tour. They'll be in Boston October 27th. The Session 2-day Irish culture and music festival that's happening at the stage at Suffolk Downs. That's the all weekend festival, plus Turnstile is going to be there in September, and so is Iggy Pop. So all of these shows are happening as well. New releases out on Friday include the Alice Cooper Band, The Revenge of Alice Cooper. It's their first album together in 50 years, which is just insane. Black Sabbath is releasing Earth, the Legendary Lost Tapes, ironically out this Friday. Bruce Dickinson, More Balls to Picasso. Elton John live from the Rainbow Theater with Ray Cooper. Gary Newman, A Perfect Circle live, and Guar, The Return of Gorgor are all coming out. In Mail Call this week, I was sent a book for my trip to Italy from Peter Wolf, which is his new book right here. It says, Waiting on the Moon is the page turner of the decade, says Peter Farrelly, the award-winning director and writer. Waiting on a Moon is a 5-star memoir, and Peter Wolf is a solid gold storyteller. I felt like I was living these stories alongside him. I loved every single minute. The author of None of This Is True, Lisa Jewell. So I got sent this for my trip to Rome. And so this is what I'm going to be reading on the plane, which I'm super excited about. So thank you to Peter Wolf for sending me his book. And hopefully when I get it finished, we'll be able to get him on the Mistress Carrie podcast, which I'm hoping is going to happen. So the website and online store, we are in final design of stickers and getting ready to order something that even the Mistress Carrie Backstage Pass holders don't know about, but a really, really cool piece of merch that I should have in the online store by, I want to say, mid to late August, which I'm super excited about. So that is coming. Backstage Pass holders, speaking of them, you've still got access to Pantera tickets and Volbeat tickets for next month at the Xfinity Center. I've also got some other shows that I'm going to be adding to that list as well. If you don't have a Mistress Carrie Backstage Pass, you can get it on Patreon, you can find out who's in the podcast before anybody else, so you can submit questions. You are going to be going to Rome with me if you have a backstage pass, because I'm going to be putting up travel blog updates. You get early access to event information, merch, discount codes. So you just go to mistresscarrie.com and click the Patreon logo, or go to patreon.com/mistresscarrie if you want to get a Mistress Carrie backstage pass. And a reminder about all of the places that you can find me on social media right here, and all of the radio stations that you can hear me every weekday, and all the radio station apps that you can download so that you can listen to my shows no matter where you're living right now. You can stream from all the radio station websites, or you can listen straight through all of the apps. And then I want to remind you guys, we're almost to 4,000 members of the Mistress Carrie Veterans Rock Group on Facebook. I want to thank everybody that helped to spread the word about our annual USMC Scout Sniper Association Skydive Boogie. The third annual event was a massive success. We had 2 Korean War veterans skydive that weekend in their 90s. It was just amazing. I think we had altogether like 29 veterans that were signed up to jump, which was awesome. And we're already looking forward to next year's event. So you can always stay up to date with all of the things that are going on in the veterans community, different organizations, resources. If you're a veteran-owned business, if you're looking to hire veterans, this is the place to go. And if you're just a civilian that wants to help our veterans community, this is a great place to find volunteer opportunities. And if you have a veteran in the family that you just want to be able to advocate for and find out information on resources and benefits, you can do all of that there as well. So there it is, guys. So as we finish up the show, obviously, to the Iron Man himself, to the Prince of Darkness, to the Osborne family, and to the members of Black Sabbath, to Zakk Wylde and all of the musicians that were part of Ozzy's numerous and highly talented solo bands, and to all of the bands that toured with Ozzy, to all of the bands we love, and to the hard rock and metal community at large, to Ozzy, there will never be another one. It is impossible to measure exactly how big of a mark he has made on all of our lives and all of the music that we love so much. So cheers to you guys. All right, guys, episode 268 of the Mistress Carrie podcast out at midnight. You're really going to love this episode, and I'm really glad that on such a sad week this week, there is someone that is just so empathetic and compassionate, like Brent Smith from Shinedown. That's my guest this week. We talk about a lot of really serious, emotional things when it comes to songwriting this week. So I think it's exactly what the doctor ordered. So this goes live at midnight tonight. So next week, I cannot say 100% that I am going to be live from Rome, but I am going to try my best to at least check in with you guys from Rome next week. If that doesn't happen, I am going to be traveling the following week. So if I don't check in from Rome next week, I am going to be traveling and not be able to do it the week after. So there's a possibility I won't see you guys for a couple of weeks. There will be new podcast episodes every week while I'm away, but I cannot promise you, for internet reasons, for travel reasons, because of time change reasons, if I'm going to be able to do it. But I would really like to be able to check in with you guys from Rome next week. So fingers crossed I can pull it off. But if I can't, you're not allowed to get mad at me. Otherwise, check my socials, get a backstage pass. I'm going to be taking you guys with me on a pretty spectacular bucket list trip for me, and I can't wait to go. So, ciao.